Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, warshippers of all ages, welcome to YouTube. My name is Sea Raptor, and it's time for another first look, this time at Tier VIII Premium American Cruiser USS Congress. Now, I had the fortune several weeks ago, probably coming up on about 5-6 weeks ago now, to kind of spoil Congress live on Twitch. I was offered the opportunity to do that by Wargaming out of St. Petersburg. They sent me some info. We knocked together a little little preview video kind of thing that I played several times over the course of the stream. I'll link that clip down below if you've seen it, and there are some differences between the stats we were given, what was spoiled, and where Congress is today as she enters the game for super testing. That's not really surprising. I mean, especially when you consider, well, I'll point them out as we go, but there were a couple things that were very eyebrow-raising about Congress when we first saw the numbers. Everybody was like, what? So, if you were that way when you first saw this ship, guys, settle in. I'll point out what's different. Remember, guys, we're not allowed to show gameplay. I can talk about port stats and all this sort of thing. I can show you all the stats of the ship. I can't show you gameplay. That's just the way it is, okay? So let's have a look around and talk about USS Congress. The memes around this ship, just the name alone, is going to generate so many memes here on the NA server. I cannot wait. Talking about survivability, 51,150 hit points. Now, this is one of the first changes that I want to point out. When we were first talking about Congress, when she was first kind of spoiled, she had the same health pool that Alaska did. At Tier 9, was over 60,000 HP, and everybody went, whoa, what? Like, that's lunacy. It was lunacy. Wargaming obviously did some internal testing and came to the same conclusion, because here we are looking at a Tier 8 Congress with about 10%, well, more like coming up on about 15 or 18% less HP than Alaska does. Now, that's not to say this is an insignificant health pool. This still makes Alaska the healthiest, the beefiest, the chunkiest cruiser at Tier 8. In fact, if I'm looking down the list here, if I'm honest, she's really kind of the only super cruiser at Tier 8. Right now, you know, when we look at Tier 9, you've got the Kronstadts and the Siegfrieds and the Azimas of the world have some competition with Alaska. Here at Tier 8, there is nothing. There is no other ship of any nation that has guns this big on a cruiser platform at Tier 8. Okay, so she is pretty chunky here, 51,150 HP. 13% torpedo protection is pretty pedestrian. It's not best in tier. It's not worst in tier. Not great, not terrible, right? It's not bad. Don't get hit by torpedoes. They don't feel good. Armor layout. If you have an Alaska in your port, you can go look at the armor layout of a Congress and know exactly what it looks like. It is literally identical. Yes, I did go into Game Models 3D and do a little rooting around. One of the things that makes Alaska notoriously difficult to Citadel is replicated here on Congress. Okay, so let's talk about this real briefly. If you go look at Little White Mouse's review of Alaska, she talks about this. So I'll highlight it briefly. Let me try and hide enough of the ship so you can get a sense of what I'm talking about here. All right, so this is Alaska's Citadel. This is Alaska's casemate armor. Now, her central belt is 229 millimeters, which is pretty amazing, right? Like, as cruisers go, this, of course, being the chunkiest, heaviest, beefiest cruiser in Tier 8, blows all the other cruisers out of the water. Nobody else has a belt like this. However, it gets even worse. For starters, you can look coming from the bow end of the ship and tell that Congress's Citadel is pretty well protected. It's quite far inside the ship. If I put the torpedo blister back up, you can kind of get a sense of just how big a gap that is, all right? But it's even worse than you think. What you can't see, what the in-game armor scheme won't show you, is that the underside of this casemate here, okay, we taper from 8 to, it's 28 up here at top to 229, but the underside of this section right in here, that is, you know, this little armor plate here, that between the Citadel and the edge of the belt that makes up the underside of the casemate here is 102 millimeters. It's a 4-inch plate. So you've got a 36 millimeter deck, there's a 4-inch plate in here, and it's just trying to get through all of this armor, even with plunging fire at long range, it can be done. But getting up on top of Alaska, and of course Congress with the same armor scheme is going to have the same problem. You get up on top of this thing at close range and citadeling it is damn near impossible, because so many things ricochet off of, you know, if they can punch through that 229 plate, that belt Awesome. But then there's the Citadel roof and everything else they've got to contend with. The Citadel roof is not thick, but there's literally a 4-inch plate on top of it that you can't see because the armor modeler in-game won't let you angle the camera down to see it. But if you go look in one of the third-party armor model viewers, it is there. So, Alaska and Congress, both very, very irritating to try and Citadel at point-blank range. So same armor layout as Alaska. Maneuverability and concealment. Hey, I'm singing a similar song here. Same as Alaska, basically, right? 33 knots here for the speed, 850 turning circle, 13-second rudder shift time. It's the same hull, guys. It's going to handle just like in Alaska. All right, surface detection. This is, of course, someplace that she is basically worst in tier. 15.5 on the surface by sea, 9.7 by air. So 15.5 is actually a little worse than the next kind of worst case scenarios, which is basically the hippers. I'm looking at you, Mines and Eugen. And then, because most tier 8 cruisers are relatively stealthy. You can get a few of them down to, 9 and change, 10, around 10 or so. This thing at a full stealth rig, you're looking at 12.2. So she's not really hiding from anybody at tier 8. Aerial detection, full stealth rig gets her down to 7.2. That does leave a gap where she can be spotted from the air without her AA engaging. So that is one of the weaknesses of the ship that a lot of people don't talk about. But if you've got an astute carrier pilot who knows to, maybe drop a fighter in the right place or drive his planes in the right zone, then he can absolutely spot this ship without having to take losses in return. Main battery. Hey! Third verse, same as the other ones. This main battery is built around 305mm guns in 3 turrets. Now, the turret arrangement is different. As you can see here, Congress packs a double turret in the A slot and a double turret in the Y or X or Z or whatever you want to call this stern turret. Back here at the stern, the only triple-barreled turret she has is the super-firing B turret here on the forward end. So she has a total of 7 barrels versus Alaska's 9. She has a couple other modifications they've made to her main battery. One, the reload time. You see there, it's 22 seconds versus 20 seconds on Alaska. So she's firing fewer shells, and she's firing them slower. She has a 195-meter dispersion circle. That is better than Alaska, but the reason for that is the maximum range. Congress's max range, 17.5 kilometers versus 19 kilometers for Alaska. So my suspicion is you're looking at the same dispersion ellipse. It's just because it's a kilometer and a half shorter. This is now what the max dispersion is at that range. The shells are identical. The shell damage is identical. Fire chance, shell velocity, all of that. If you fired the guns out of an Alaska, Congress's guns will perform the same. They simply don't have as many. They don't have as much range, and you're not firing as many shells, and they reload a little slower. We'll talk about her secondary battery real briefly because Alaska likes to brawl. You could get away with the same kind of thing with Congress because same hull, right? So let's take a quick peek here. She does mount the ubiquitous American 5-inch double-barreled 38 here. She's got 6 of these, 2 on each side, 1 forward and 1 aft, with a 6.6 kilometer radius. Now that's not amazing, right? Like it is what it is, but if you find yourself brawling a bit, especially with another cruiser or perhaps a battleship, you might get a fire or 2 out of these. You're not going to build for a secondary build, though. Let's just be honest here. That's not something you're going to do. So yeah, again, it's the same main batteries as Alaska. You're just getting fewer guns. Aaa Defense. This is also pretty noteworthy. It's something that Alaska is quite good at, and honestly, Congress here is as well. Her outer ring, of course, made up of the dual-purpose guns we just looked at over in her secondary battery. She puts up 5 flak pups at 1540 damage a pop. That's pretty typical. That's basically what almost every American cruiser at Tier 8 does. So essentially, if you're used to driving a Baltimore, a Wichita, a Cleveland, all of those ships basically have the same outer bubble that Congress here has. It's the 5 puffs, and when you look at her continuous damage, it's the same 109 that the outer ring of all those other ships. Now, her middle ring is a little different. She is packing the Bofors, so she's got quite a bit of these double Bofors mounts around, and that gives her a 273 DPS middle ring. That's a little lower than Baltimore, but it is ahead of Cleveland. It's actually pretty comparable. I mean, this is not the Zeven Provinciën that we looked at last week, which has a ridiculous middle ring, but it's noteworthy. Like, it's not bad. And then, of course, her inner ring on the back of the 20mm Oerlikons. So she's got, I'd say if you're used to playing a Tier 8 American cruiser, a Baltimore, a Cleveland, the AA on this ship is going to perform approximately like that. Like, it's in the same ballpark. This is not Anchorage. Anchorage is way on the low end, right? Wichita is notably kind of not as good. Congress and Baltimore and Cleveland, like Baltimore and Cleveland are better because they have stronger middle auras. But Congress is not terrible. Well, Cleveland has never been stronger middle aura, but Baltimore does. Anyway, the bottom line is Congress is not bad. Like, this is something that she will do pretty well, especially up against a Tier 8 carrier. Tier 10 carrier, no, nothing to write home about there. Quick look over consumables. Oop, wrong button. Here we go. All right, so obviously it's a ship or mortal warships. You're going to damage control party. You should have a choice here of defensive fire and hydro, 5-kilometer hydro or defensive fire. Nothing unusual there. You get your choice between surveillance radar or to use her aircraft facilities, fighter or spotter. You're going to use the aircraft. You're probably going to use the radar. This is essentially Tier 8 American radar. This is Baltimore radar, right? 35-second duration, 10-kilometer range, and she does get 3 charges of a standard heal. This is the same heal that Aaa gets, for example, or Prince Eugen, right? So she's yet another Tier 8 cruiser with a heal, and with her health pool, that's pretty noteworthy. There's definitely a lot to like here. She hasn't been wearing her camo, so I could show you her actual detection radiuses, but she does come with a standard premium camo here. You can kind of take a look at the 2 different color schemes. I quite like the color schemes. I think they look really, really nice. So yeah, there's not really much else to say about Congress. She is essentially a baby Alaska. It's the same guns, the same hull. It's not quite the same anti-aircraft suite, but it's still pretty robust. It's more comparable to Tier 8. Alaska's AA suite is a little beefier because she's more likely to see high-tier carriers. She's going to handle the same. The guns reload a little slower. They have a little less range for the same detection. So she does bring some drawbacks that Alaska doesn't have. But, I mean, she's got that survivability. And that's the thing about this ship, guys. This ship at Tier 8 is going to be hard to kill. Now, she will burn. This is something that we're starting to see changing at high tier with Stalingrad, for example. These super cruisers all tend to burn longer. I expect Congress to have that deficiency. It hasn't been stated anywhere, I don't think. And I can't play the ship and then come back and tell you, but I'm willing to bet you money that she has the same 45 or 60 second fire duration that most super cruisers do. It's 45 seconds. Yeah, I think it's 45. That most of the super cruisers do expressly because she has all this extra HP to throw around. So yeah, if you like Alaska, you're gonna like Congress. I feel like if you don't like Alaska, this ship's probably not for you. There we go, guys. There's our first look at Tier 8 Premium American Cruiser USS Congress. Hope you enjoyed that. Wash your hands, be safe, and I'll catch you next time.